Hello everyone, welcome to the Railway Civil Engineers Association. It's nice to be back after a Christmas break, and we've got a fantastic talk tonight on the King's Cross remodelling project. We've got David Roberts and Mark Bell from Network Rail coming to talk to us about the first major track remodelling project at King's Cross in, I think, just over 40 years, which was successfully completed. So a substantial project that will improve journey times on the East Coast Main Line and reliability of the railway. So some really interesting stuff to hear about. So just before we get to that, I'm just going to let you know of our next talk, which is on February the 24th. And we've got Claire Bint from Network Rail, Ben Ling from Story Contracting, and Nick Jewell from Pell Frischman are going to come and talk to us about dealing with the effects of adverse weather and landslides, which seem to be happening more often these days. And they're going to tell us about a particular problem job at Morpeth on the East Coast Main Line. So we've got a interesting and topical talk there. Just a reminder about membership, it's £18.50 for the year for ordinary members, £8.75 for young professionals and £5.50 for retired. So if you join, you get mailings of the events, and when we can put on site visits and the like, you get the option to come to those as well. So yeah, if you're working in the rail industry and you're a civil engineer, I'd encourage you to join and find out more about us. Okay, there's links to the website there, rcea.org.uk, and I think there's also our LinkedIn page there as well. So I won't say very much more, just to say I hope you enjoy the talk, and do paste any questions in the live Q&A pane. If you click on the little question mark symbol at the top of your screen, hopefully you can paste questions, or if someone else asks a question that you like, click on the thumbs up, and the more of those we get, we'll try and deal with those first. So without further ado, I shall hand over to David and Mark to give their talk. Thanks very much.
Jonathan. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Obviously, just a bit of a brief background. David, I'm sort of the delivery director for TRU at the moment. Obviously, going back 6 months, myself and Mark were leading the completion of the works at King's Cross. I'll let Mark give a bit of a brief overview of himself when he comes on in a bit. Obviously, at the time, I was the route delivery director for Network Rail on the East Coast. And basically, tonight's presentation, if it's okay with everyone, we're going to run through King's Cross and actually the works that we did. Obviously, we're going to go through the background, a bit on the scope, obviously the challenges we faced, the civil scope in particular, given the audience we're talking to tonight. The partial closure, which is one of the longest ones I've been involved in, and probably many people in the industry have been involved in, good at 100-day plus closure, which was on top of a load of other quite significant closures that we had on during the works themselves. And then just a project summary at the end of the kind of things we learned. So that's the idea to this evening. In terms of the actual project itself, as Jonathan sort of explained, it's part of the East Coast upgrade, and effectively that's a £1.2 billion investment that the government, through Network Rail and the industry, committed to. And obviously part of that was King's Cross, but be remiss of me not to talk about other works that were going on at the same time. We included Warrington grade separation, which is obviously part of the splitting of freight off the main line just north of Peterborough, quite a significant scheme there, and also East Coast power supply upgrade schemes. The reason why I mention these is that obviously King's Cross at the southern end of the route was a magnificent sort of example of civil engineering, but for delivering the benefits and everything else that we're trying to achieve, it's a combination of all these schemes together that add up to the £1.2 billion investment that in turn drive forward and deliver the end benefits to the new Azuma fleet that we introduced on the East Coast Main Line, and also the improvements on journey time, and also general capacity running in and out of King's Cross up to the north of England. So King's Cross, in specific terms, it was obviously been a huge replacement of the track and overhead line sort of structures, and also for those who know the area, quite a complex signalling system as well. And also we reopened one of the tunnels at the north end of the station, which again was quite a significant piece of engineering works. Again, Mark will touch on that in a bit. And obviously at the end of the day, as I say, without completing the remodelling, the works at King's Cross, we couldn't achieve any of the benefits that sort of the power upgrades and the actual decongestion north of Peterborough have achieved. So it was in its own right a significant civil engineering piece of work, and obviously I would say it was a once in a lifetime sort of opportunity. Having now moved on to TRU, I might take a weather check on that and ask me in 10 years whether TRU is actually equally as sort of significant engineering piece of work. But certainly King's Cross is one of the biggest things I've done in my career, and Mark and the team were absolutely fantastic. So I'll hand over to Mark now just to play a brief video, which is obviously just setting the scene a bit. So Mark, if I could leave it with you, please.
Yeah, of course. I'll just play this first. Okay, thanks, Aran. Afternoon. So I'm Mark Bell. I'm proudly can call myself though as the program manager for the King's Cross remodelling project. Definitely a highlight of my career. A civil engineer. I've worked around the world on many rail projects, and this one was definitely a jewel for me in complexity and a challenge. But more about the project. So as you can see from here, that it was truly multidisciplinary. I think King's Cross has once been explained as close as you can get to a major heart surgery on a railway. It had to be completely integrated and a one delivery staging to deliver all the multidisciplinary pieces of the jigsaw. Just from its geographical constraints to the access to everything else that we needed to bring together under one team. So as you can see, it's got lots of civil elements to it there. Track, huge amount of signalling, full electrification remodeling, as well as platform works as well. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to really say a huge thank you to all the parties that helped, and it was the one team approach between all these parties that was my view on how we made this project a success. Despite them being all on individual contracts, we did manage to create a one team approach. And there's evidence throughout, not just design, but planning and in construction and on site, even through to commissioning and testing, how everyone helped each other, and that come together at the end. And in as Dave says, in the partial closure, as we called it, and the entry into service for the new layout. So without these partners being so collaborative and working together, we wouldn't have got close to it as some of the individual parts. So thank you to everyone who's been involved. So we couldn't get away from not putting a rail diagram into a presentation like this. So I'm sure if there's anyone on the call who's traveled the East Coast, I'm sure you got frustrated as you think you've made good time, or you had made good time entering into King's Cross, and then only to be held about a mile out, generally with a notice of we're waiting for a platform. This whole layout was very constrained. So to get trains in and out of platforms, there's so many crossovers to go across, and given that it was in some cases 40 years old plus, and limped through from a maintenance point of view, because of just the sheer complexity of it and the access required to get in, it took a long time. It would take a long time for a train to get across them. So it's very constrained, and I'm sure there've been many people who've been stuck probably a mile out just waiting to get in, or a train can't leave on time because it can't find a path out. This was our final layout, which I'll show you later on in an aerial photograph. It still looks busy, but it was such more efficient. And also, as you can see, the constraint of the 4 roads in is now 6 roads in and out. Sorry, so six roads. So the overall layout was really to simplify it and give clear lines of sight to get in and out for faster, reliable services. So doesn't look much on drawings, on line diagrams, but reality is, as a whole, the whole modelling comes from about a good few miles out. It comes all the way out, and we remodel the whole lot moving in. So about the overall timeline. So designs did start way back. There's a huge amount of design work done. It'd be absolutely remiss to jump straight to construction. And this is really where all the integration started. There's way over 100 packages of works across all the disciplines. We did use an integrated model and a fully integrated assurance process. I'm sure if you spoke to people on the project, they'd probably find that a lot more frustrating than working in a single discipline design. But there's no way that we could have brought this alive without bringing in that integration and bringing in that collaboration in the design stages. And another point is we had to design with the entry into service and the commissioning strategies in place and in our minds, just from the way it was all to be staged. Our staging design to get something like this was always in place. So across all those project partners and their design partners did a fantastic job to piece all this together. And under our Network Rail DPE and his office, who brought this all together with an LDO, which was a great feat in itself to get this design done. There's lots of enabling works. As I said, this part of the network it's very difficult to maintain in itself, and information is quite scarce in some senses. So there was a lot of investigation works done to influence design, but also to influence our staging. And then the key delivery points, I've made a note of these because it really is a luxury to be able to get so many closures and possessions over in a weekend. And I'll touch on later the 11-day, and then I still believe, or I could argue, it's the largest one on the East Coast, largest by time. Some people measure by number of engineering trains, but not largest by time closure that's been. To have such a luxury to close such a part of the network like King's Cross down, it's not easy for our operational friends. and projects like this, we have to justify exactly why we're going to utilize, and we need every minute of track access that we ask for. They weren't full shutdowns, and I'll explain that a little bit in a second. Some of the challenges and some of the scopes challenges. So it is a really heavily constrained work site. Two examples of this there. We only had 2 gates to get in on one side and 1 on the other. That was for vehicles. On one side they were 2 miles apart, and on one side in the throat. So gaining access is very difficult. And when you did get in, and these gates, when we did bring plant into the corridor, we were literally getting onto track. So there's no real cess to talk of in on one side anyway. So it was really heavily constrained. And then of course we had for those who know King's Cross, we got Google building the headquarters right next to us. Major building works. So just the road network, the delivery network, everything was so populated and so constrained. Thames Water Sewer running across the site. I've split this one out because it was a fantastic piece of work, really well done, but very challenging. Of course, we had to keep King's Cross open and operationally throughout, and that's not just passengers and moving passengers and trains. All the deliveries for all the shops and the coffee shops and everything else that comes into King's Cross, we had to coordinate with all the time. I've mentioned there for most of our plant, you had to just use rail plant, very limited. Night times was sometimes down less than 3 hours. We had to treat it Formula One style, almost military of being on the start line, ready for all of these. There was heritage stated in King's Cross Station, and the environment and the protection of that. And of course, I couldn't deliver this talk without mentioning COVID, which we certainly didn't put in the plan to start with, like the rest of the world, but we had to deal with it throughout, and I'll touch on that because I think it's really important. So I'll say up front, secret to our success for all of this, A is acting as one team, but planning. I don't think I've ever worked on a project that has took the planning of our works so seriously and put so much effort into it. And on reflection, I look back and I can't see a bigger influencer than us planning our works. All of our work started at T40 out where we could, where we knew about it, and we continued through 26, T-12, 8, 4, 2, 1. And this project didn't treat it as just a meeting and a gateway. They were real big challenge sessions. We had dedicated teams to drive us through. Our principal contractor team really helped us work through, guiding through, and really we were literally into minute by minute detail across these, regardless of whether it was the 100-day plan or a 10-day or a 2-day. This was the secret to our success. And all of these, no matter which discipline was leading and which one was working, they were all treated as a single project trying to deliver. So we had one entry into service for the weekend. We had one program. We had, we integrated everything we could. So it really was the secret to success. I believe it's the secret to success for delivery of projects inside the rail corridor. I've specifically picked out three large bits of scope that we did, and globally for the partial closure. I hope you can see the photographs when we get them to do them justice. First one is Camden Sewer. So if you don't mind, I'll flick to this just so I can talk through the notes. But Camden Sewer ran, and used to run on this yellow dashed line. It ran right across the corridor, across all 4 tracks, and actually across right underneath lots of crossovers. And the levels it was put at is very shallow underneath at some point, and really there was a hump in the track to get over it. It wasn't very easy to maintain track, and also for us to then go and realign the whole junction to the layout that I put in earlier, that wouldn't have been achievable with that old sewer was in place. So we realigned to this other blue one with the green chambers you can see across the track to line up from D, which went into the outfall, and A went into outfall. So it sat directly underneath all the tracks. The connection pits being A and B, really, which you can see are just both either sides of the tracks. They were very close to the running rails, which obviously made it a different safety constraint for us. So again, planning come into that, and I'll touch on it in a second. I think the photographs probably just help explain that really. So you can see in this picture on the right hand side, you can see how close the running rails and the live operational rail was to our works. It's significant. Decent line open operations. Site access was really restricted. The King's Cross signal box, for those who know, is right next to where we were on this. You know, at one point we had to change to working in white periods because of the vibration of putting sheet piles in. The excavations or the spoil had to go out in a certain way. We had to load trains of a night time underneath the wires. It was a really constrained piece of work to get such an engineering solution in play for all of the non-possession works. This is on the west side of the track. This is chamber A, and you can. This was painful for us to dig in really tough stone, basically rock. The ground conditions were really bad. So slow for us to dig, and when I say we were digging, unfortunately, almost with hand tools, and because you couldn't get machineries in there as such from constrained sites, we're literally lifting buckets out at a time and taking them out. And of course, we had to go in to weekends, so we did utilize some of those weekends to bring on track plant. It was the only way we could have done that, the only way we could get in, and therefore that was a demonstration of the shutting the railway down, where we could take advantage of to build some of these things. This next bit is a video of Christmas 2020. Hopefully this has got sound, but so this is the 10-day closure, 24th of December start to the 3rd of January. For those who can remember, this was the Christmas when COVID rules around travel really hit the headlines. Our plan got changed pretty close to Christmas, although it was in place. So we had to work together as a team to change the plan. We had to open at least two lines on the fast lines open by the 31st, and we had to open all 4 lines up by the 3rd. To top it all off, Storm Bella hit for us on Christmas Eve. I say that because I still am in awe of the people on site who worked through that, amended the plan actually on the night with using forecasting of the weather coming in. And again, admiration to the team for their planning. But there's a video which basically was the final connection of from across the 4 tracks.
I'm afraid we haven't got the sound, Mark, but the captions are quite self-explanatory, so that's good.
I think, Mark, if I could just cut in at the moment, is that all right? I think one of the captions on there did say about handing back early and getting the confidence from our industry colleagues of how we were planning our possessions, and certainly that 11-day blockade over Christmas that year gave confidence that we were actually able to deliver what we said, and that sort of gave confidence to the overall industry that when we came onto the 101-day blockade, we had some track record and we were managing efficiently. So I think that's a key point for that Christmas. It was a good trial, as well as being a fantastic civil engineering experience. It was a real test of whether we could deliver major possessions back on time. So one we carried out through the rest of the programme. Thanks, Mark.
No worries. Thanks, Dave. So I'll move on to the second part of our civils piece, which I've picked out. So platform extensions. Of course, most passengers and most of the public will never get to see some of the track work we did or the signalling. I'm sure they're very grateful that it works, but the platforms is where we always knew that people would see the major difference. Ultimately, we needed to remodel the ends of each of the platforms of varying lengths to straighten out the run in and run out from the platforms. For those who remember King's Cross old platforms, they were very curved, almost C-shaped in some as we move further east. So huge amount of demolition and remodeling of them. These were particularly constrained. So King's Cross, affectionately known as the Queen's Gate, on the east side. That was for one access, and on the other side through the Google building. Very, very constrained for us. Of course, we had to protect everything within the station. Huge lesson learned that we learned throughout. And then the safety and environmental considerations. You know, we had to bring trains and engineering trains in. Leaving them running idle with the diesel trains is not something you're allowed to do to combat things like that. The dust that was just inevitable of an operation this size. Bringing in dust suppression, cleaning, and general noise. So trying to work in and around all that in a live operational rail station of the prestige of King's Cross brought its own challenges. Heritage brickwork. So one of the platforms has some heritage brickwork underneath. So again, public won't see that as such. But yeah, we had to try and do our best to work around it, protect it where we could, and make good where we could, and then before backfill and building the new walls in and around it. So it's still there, it's still protected. Some photographs here, hopefully they do it justice, just as we can see the size and the extent, and the amount of protection. On the left hand side, the white wall you can kind of see was for us to create a whole working environment outside of the public, and you can see that the passenger trains are there. Picture on the left, you can see protections, the signalling and things like that, and the track. The concrete pump that we had to pull in, that was pumping and set up all the way from inside the station, just because of the restrictions to bring concrete in and the logistic issues. Again, some extents, you can see the extent of where you can see the coper stones. So way into the train shed was the extent of the demolition. And as you can see there, you can see where we were, as I say, well inside the train shed when before the demolition and the remodeling. This was made particularly difficult, obviously, because it's the end of the line, and I'll touch on it later on when I talk about the partial closure. But for the engineering trains support, like you can just see here on the right, it was difficult because we had to stage all the track to be in or to be left in, because otherwise we would have got landlocked. So even though we thought we had, and we said we had 100 days to do the partial closure, which the platforms were in reality we didn't. We had 8 to 10 days to demolish all of the platform and get rid of all the spoil and bring what we could in on trains. After that, we were landlocked because the time was required to start ripping out the junction and the trains and the track. Therefore, we was landlocked. So, and on the other side, on this far side, it was very constrained, very tight, single line working, one platform at a time. We couldn't take this approach as much as we could on this side with bigger space. Huge. I think the logistics was the most impressive part of this. Apologies, I can't remember the exact number of blocks, etc., and cubes of concrete, etc. But it is huge. We're talking 8 to 9 hour concrete pours. Surfacing materials was 15 hours to surface a platform for each course that we put down. Talking extensive. We were going for extensive durations for each of these kind of stages within our plans. As you can see again on the right hand side, the white wall was the separation between the public operational platforms once we'd commissioned half of it, and the work going on behind it and the constraints we had to work within. Picture on the right shows the second stage where we did the local platforms, which were much smaller in demolition and rebuild size, but so constrained in space that made it a lot more difficult. A really good piece of work. The third one I've picked out is the slab track. So you've seen on the first video, and Dave explained that we opened up the East Bore tunnel and placed track through it to then increase the capacity and the access and egress into the station. The photos I'll show and the pictures do it justice. So as you can see, the huge numbers, 10,000 ton of spoil removed. That was over 30 engineering trains of a night time. For those who have done it, you'll know it's no mean feat to fill a train safely under wires on an engineering shift. To do 30 of those without incident is absolutely fantastic. The access in to do this was approximately a kilometre away, and in most cases, literally a one-in, one-out coordination was required. With planning of our deliveries went down to the minutes. There's holding patterns. Every piece of kit that come in through that gate was coordinated. As you can see from the picture, the slab track was brought in panels and then stitched together. But way prior to that, all I'll say is thank you to the people who've been there for the 40 years prior, who used this tunnel as a bit of a dumping ground for all spoil, for all other activities. As you can see from just the shape of the profile, the amount of spoil that was in there. You can see from these photos how it built up the sides and the size of the tunnel. If I then show you where we had to get it to, the amount of pride that this team took into getting this to this level was amazing. I genuinely could say you could eat your dinner off the bottom of that tunnel. It's worth mentioning here that the closer to the King's Cross end, the canal goes over the top, and before we could go in and do the old overhead wire works in here, there was extensive waterproofing works was also carried out in this tunnel, and other tunnels as across the whole. There's three bores, but it's really a huge amount of work just to get it to a state where we could then start to build it up. And you can see that the slab track there was all brought together and stitched together, and rails brought in and linked up either end. A fantastic piece of work. It's also worth mentioning the monitoring scheme. So because of just the sheer amount of work that's been going on in and around the King's Cross area, extensive building works going on above. There's been a monitoring scheme that has been in place for many years in this area. By us doing this and excavating that tunnel and actually putting a monitoring scheme in place for the settlement of that tunnel was an extensive piece of work. It was set up so it was remote, had triggers, so our engineering team will get called off their phones, etc., to go out and inspect. We had surveyors out all the time looking at it, so we knew all the way through of the behaviour of that tunnel as we were unloading it with the spoil and then loading it. And then in and around March 2020, if my memory serves me right, that the East Coast Rail industry and partners, and by that I mean Network Rail, the train operators, DFT, as part of the industry board that was set up, we got together to understand what the overall strategy for King's Cross and the climax of the East Coast upgrade, what that strategy will be in light of the COVID pandemic. And we wanted to explore the opportunities of the lower ridership at that time and how we could take advantage of that, and is there a way to deliver King's Cross. There was several plans presented throughout. It was a very open industry challenge. Of course, I would have liked just to say, can I please shut the whole of King's Cross down, all lines, everything for so many days, and that's the easiest way. Of course, it would be for us, but not quite obviously on the same page as operations. For obvious reasons of still moving passengers, King's Cross was to remain open. So around June time, the final piece of that jigsaw was set of how we were going to bring King's Cross remodelling to a close, and the agreement was 101-day closure. Never been seen anything like this before of this importance, especially in King's Cross. and we had some sequencing. So it was fast lines first to the east side. They were then commissioned those into service, switched the operational services onto those, and then completed the slow lines, and then completed the final commissioning. So it was a real industry decision to do it. I was very supported throughout, as was the team. Everything was considered, but at that point, that was the planning then set, and we really went into our planning stages. The level of planning, despite it being 100 days, still went down to the machine movement, to the minute planning, contingency plans, milestones. Everything was considered at that point. Strategy really, as I said, was underpinned really by three things. So we had to keep the station open. We had to sequence the work to maximize engineering trains. And we had to allow for the signaling and electrical commissioning strategies. So how were they going to come back into service? And that was really dictating the 50-50 split between doing east and west. Those three things really underpinned how we were going to approach this. I've probably discredited some, I've discredited a huge amount of people, but the key things were the platforms, all the track, electrification, and the signalling. There was a huge amount of other things that went on and took advantage of closing the railway down. Key challenges, and I purposely left safety to this point. Safety throughout the project was always paramount to us. I think the constraint work site and that challenge probably was the hardest part of the safety, but especially in COVID times, working 24 hours a day for 100 days, over 500,000 hours spent. We had to put so many COVID restrictions in. Unfortunately, we did have some COVID cases throughout. We had protocols to deal with that, and we looked after our workforce as much as we could. And the companies that I mentioned earlier were fantastic in supporting not only the people but the project in that sense. There's a real challenge to us. Fatigue within those 100 days. The excitement and the enthusiasm from everyone was fantastic, but that could also be an issue because everyone wanted to be on every shift, and we had to really roster huge draw around the country for this project, from all angles and all plant, people, everything. So really important that we kept on top of welfare and safety. Logistics. So we had 100. We ended up with 103 trains actually, but we planned 100. Very difficult because of the one way in, one way out, and the logistics. For half of the 100 days, we couldn't get more than one train in the possession. So therefore, you literally had to work it, bring it in, work it, use it, and send it, and then bring the next one in. I've already touched on the access for delivery is really difficult. And I actually do want to pause on this next one. It is so impressive. There's so many in-corridor plant moves for a civil project, you know, outside of rail corridor. It's very important from a safety point of view that we know where our plant movement's on, but inside a rail corridor where there is no or very limited opportunities in such a live environment, as you can see on the photograph, to create people plant separations very easy. We really focused in on our in-plant corridor moves. There's thousands of them over the 100 days. Every one of them was planned. Every one of them was monitored. Every one of them was confirmed. And we really managed that well. I think that was an underpinning piece of our success. And then, of course, throughout this, we had to be realistic. We had a schedule, we had a baseline, we had 20 weeks of planning, but we were never going to get through 100 days without it varying. In some cases, I think we went up to over 16, 20 hours in delay at one point across certain activities, but we kept a live schedule management and a control room and worked together with that one team help across all partners on how we could get it back. Again, these photographs. I'll show you some of the extent really. Again, there's the platform areas, but you can kind of see once we got going with this, there was no real, it was a simple case of it had to go back. Dave mentioned earlier, it's because of the success we had at Christmas. It wasn't a difficult conversation really, which to have that with exec and with our industry partners, because they had confidence that we were managing it. And although you could see, you know, there was a huge hole at one point, probably half the size of a football field. The confidence that with a plan was what we were working to, everyone was working to it, really led us on to know that we were on the stage we should have been. Here on this one on the right hand side, you can kind of see that just coming out of the tunnel, you can see a passenger train, and you can see our engineering train on freshly laid tracks, laying a new track. You can see how the constraint that we had to work. Electrification, I put this in specifically. I hope I don't upset signaling people, because I just realised I haven't put many signaling wins in there, but I've picked out electrification. It was fantastic to see how many the machines and how many road rail, how many MUPs that they got in the air. And of course, from a safety point of view, when we're stringing wires and moving with such amount of vehicles like this, you really have to make sure that the site's clear, site's safe, everyone knows what's going on. And of course, when we're energizing, everyone has to be clear. It was great to us. This was, and the other thing to think is logistically and from a time point of view, there were obviously constraints because they have to follow the track layout going in, and of course all the civils being complete. So they waited patiently, this team on the sidelines, waiting for infrastructure to come ready, and then they really did focus in. It was great to see. Picture there, you can just see that there's sheer amount of yellow plant and orange vests, and then our track going in on new platforms. Another time-lapse video. I hope this one comes through. It can.
It's not come up yet, Mark.
It hasn't.
No. Perhaps we can come back to it at the end, maybe.
Yeah, we can just see that slide. I take it that's not just a link you can click on or fire it up.
Okay. Give me 1 minute. Sorry.
No worries, mate.
How can I?
Should we come back to that later if we can?
Yeah, I'll see if I can get it back on. Sorry everyone.
Well, we can clearly see the scale of the project and the massive amount of work done.
Is he just frozen, Mark? We can deliver a civil engineering project, but probably struggle on delivering some slides on an evening, so apologies.
PowerPoint is the real technology.
I was going to say, I think the next bit was actually on industry partners. I think if you're happy for me to take over, Mark.
There you go. Yeah. So, oh no, lessons learned, Dave. Sorry.
Okay, go on then.
So yeah, sorry. I will quickly get that video to work. But so I think we're remiss to do this talk and not talk about the lessons learned. We have, as a project, completed the lessons learned documents. We have been around other projects, and we have shared them around other projects. I hope many people in the industry do get the opportunity to do such a thing as the partial closure, etc. So safe delivery by above everyone else. So the consideration of our design and the safe delivery was in the design, and it's not a safety first when it gets to site. I think it's plain from what I've said, the integration of our planning of our works, that to me, that's the biggest part of bringing safety conversation to the table. And then, of course, looking after our welfare, our workforce, and our welfare of all our people on the projects. Very difficult in the COVID times. I thought our principal contractor did very well to be at the forefront of as the rest of the country was, to implement new things. Program integration, single source of truth. My team probably heard me say that more times than they care to. When we had to deliver, you have to deliver these projects under one plan. I know everyone's under different contracts, but we had to bring it all together. And you have to get one goal for the whole project, to bring it together, to understand it. And I'll just say, for anyone who's on this to learn anything, is plan, and plan again. You can never plan too much in live rail environments. You have to be ready for changes. But the more you plan, and the more everyone is on board with that plan and it's communicated, that I honestly believe it's the secret to success for rail projects. And there's the final layout. And we had, I'm sure it was a brighter blue sky than that on the day, or it certainly felt like it when I took the photograph. But yeah, that's all the hard work.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, industry collaboration. I mean, Mark has talked very much about the civil engineering aspects, and credit to him and the team. You know, without them, this project would never have happened. And I can touch on that at the end a bit more. But I think it's really important to remember the industry's part in this as well. We weren't just doing the civil engineering construction aspects. We had a really close working relationship, as you would expect, with the various operators. And actually the journey and passenger handling experience was absolutely fundamental in terms of making sure that, again, we could actually operate the railway during the various stages that Mark's outlined. And certainly, given the pandemic that we incurred during the construction phase, the ability to manage the customers during the various ebbs and flows, and we had to adapt the plan all the time just to reflect what was happening, was a credit to everyone. But the key thing I'm really trying to emphasise here is there were over 50 people working alongside the industry to help this happen, and really without them, as I say, whilst it's a civil engineering sort of discussion tonight, without those kind of people, we couldn't facilitate the access we got and all the other opportunities we explored. As I say, the passenger handling and messaging was some of the best I've seen, and certainly in the Modern Railways Awards for this last year, 2021, the Innovation Awards, we actually got a Major Project of the Year award, partly because of the engineering feat that we achieved, but very much so down to the passenger handling message that was going out there. The other thing to remember is, again, why the hell are we doing this? I mean, clearly, great civil engineering job, and you know, brilliant if you're involved in infrastructure, but fundamentally we needed to make sure the trains worked. So again, key message here is that we had to do over 2,000 training days for drivers, and that planning as part of the overall sequencing of events. Again, Mark and the team did a fabulous job to bring it all together to make sure that we could actually link it as an integrated programme. And without fail, one of the most complex things, other than the engineering, was actually the train planning. And again, the route colleagues who helped us in planning this, you know, I see it's saying there we had 8 base timetables over that 14-month period, and then 6 bespoke ones for the actual partial closure. It was immense, and again, the time and effort from the people in train planning, and it's a scarce resource. And at this point, again, given the context we were operating in the COVID environment, we were having pressures across not only the eastern region, but nationally on how we're going to manage resources and priorities. So again, the way we brought this together is a credit to everybody's willingness to work together. And ultimately then also the regulatory aspects, the CSM sort of aspects of bringing this new infrastructure into play. Again, some of what we achieved and the relationship Mark and the team had, and getting the confidence of the regulator and other safety bodies, you know, you can't undermine that on a scheme of this nature. A fabulous achievement, and I'll say probably if it was done outside COVID, this would still be one of the most immense schemes I've been involved in, privileged to have the team along with me. But to do it during COVID with all the restrictions and added burden that brought on everyone, and it was a changing sort of shifting sands for us in a lot of areas, the ability for way the team adapted is a credit particularly to Mark. You know, without him, this, as I said before, this project would not have happened. His behaviour generated throughout the whole team and the supply chain enabled us to deliver a really complex scheme. So sort of finalising and sort of closing remarks, you know, to deliver this for best part 269 million quid, probably just doesn't do it justice. It was a complex scheme, and the partners from the infrastructure colleagues who, you know, the various contracting arms, just willingness to work together in a hub and spoke model, where we set the right behaviours, the right incentives were sort of created to work together, and they all had a common goal. You know, we as an industry stood together at the end, and we're proud of what we achieved from an industry perspective, not just from the construction areas. So it's a great tribute to everybody involved, and from my point, again, please, at the same time we were doing King's Cross, we were doing Warrington, so managing that sort of workload with the supply chain, with our industry partners, and keeping the whole railway going, given what we're doing at Warrington at the same point, you can't underestimate how much we did and the advantage we actually took from doing this works during COVID. I think one of the questions that's being posed is, what did we achieve by bringing sort of a big bang sort of approach? In my view, and Mark can correct me, it probably shaved off best part 12 months from a programme that, to be honest with you, I don't know whether we would have ever delivered King's Cross if COVID hadn't happened. I think the risk was it was so complex, and the phasing sort of would have probably been too difficult, and would have probably been another 40 years before somebody else tried to do something as complex. So COVID was an enabler, but I think the people involved to adapt and sort of enable us to get it all done is a tribute to everybody involved. So thank you. And as I say, the plan and replan was something that Mark sort of embedded within the team, and I think that paid absolute dividends throughout. We handed back the railway on the 7th of June. There was a slight hiccup on the morning, which I won't go into unless people want to ask me questions about it, but overall this programme really was well received, and the Transport Secretary came down on the 7th and opened it, and you know, it was fabulous to be involved in. So thank you, Jonathan, and more importantly, thank you to Mark for sticking with me. I wasn't the most pleasant of person to work with during this period, but he really was great fun to work with everybody involved. So thank you, Jonathan. Over to you.
Thank you very much, both of you. That's fantastic talk. Amazing project as well. Just thinking about it, that must be the biggest remodelling on the East Coast Main Line, at least since electrification, I would think. And certainly, you know, a massive improvement when you think how train journeys have changed on the East Coast Main Line in the last 40 years, and how many more trains are running, more services. So to be doing all this work, improving the line speeds, putting back in the additional tracks, increasing capacity, it's wonderful to hear that, and it's probably even more important now with the integrated rail plan, because East Coast Main Line is going to be an important component of that. So really good work you've done. So I'm going to kick off with the questions, and I'm going to try and do the most popular first. I'll just start with Darren Self's question, which is kind of echoing that really, but what a fantastic project. With the hub and spoke contract arrangement, was anything specific done to incentivise the various contract parties to act collaboratively in such a complex project?
I was going to say, I won't get into the specific commercials for obvious reasons, but I think just having aligned goals. I mean, basically at the start of this project, there was a win-win. The industry as a whole could be seen to deliver one of the most complex resignaling, remodelling schemes around. So I think that set the tone. And I think the win-win for everybody under the hub and spoke was we went out and did it, and I think demonstrated that the Morgan Sindals, the Balfour Beatties and CRSAs and the Siemenses all undertook an immense project. So I think, as I say, if you don't mind me not getting into the commercial incentivisation, but there were some packages out there in terms of the way the contracts were set up. But overall, I think it was just getting a common set of objectives that we could prove in sort of challenging times, that we could get out there and be a force to be relied on to deliver the actual project. I think that's the best way I'll describe it, Darren. I hope that answers your query, but happy to chat offline if you want more specifics.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll carry on and just interject with me if you want to say anything more on any of these. Just a question from Ed Gardner. What options in terms of Slab Track did you consider, and what led to the final choice?
Yeah, it's a good question. If I'm honest, I'm conventional track base and was quite quickly ruled out because of the tunnel shape and the halfway through there was a low spot effectively, so we couldn't be able to get that track bed in. I don't know specifically from the concrete bed type arrangement what was considered, if I'm being honest. I know that again. I think I'm allowed to. It was our Alliance team, our Network Alliance team, working with Romberg with it. I think they were embedded, and I think that was another collaborative piece where the design was put together. I think they worked on quite a few options, but sorry, I'm not. I wouldn't be able to answer, to be fair.
I think as a piece of innovation, it just helped the program run a lot smoother, having it the way we use these Slab Track sort of technologies. I think it was an added benefit, but clearly we felt it was something we need to do from an innovation perspective as well. I think obviously it being used elsewhere in the UK, but it certainly from a delivery perspective was very sort of beneficial from the program.
I guess it's quite a tight alignment there, trying to get under the canal but over the Camden Sewer.
Yeah, you probably couldn't tell from the photos the dip and the hump, and the sewer that was the enabling works. Once we cleared all that, the rest of it was relatively straightforward. But the Slab Track was certainly a very quick installation method, so I think it really helped get back the program in the circumstances. We weren't aware with COVID was going to happen, but it certainly helped us pull back the program in a lot of areas.
Definitely, yes, yeah. I didn't get from the presentation actually. What sort of depth were you above the Camden Sewer? Was it quite close to the surface?
The original was very close. I've never seen track bed so thin underneath sleeper, and in fact, they were specially adapted sleeper on the actual point of the sewer. Our new sewer is about 3.5 meters below track bed, but right. the existing Victorian brick one was less than a meter in one case.
Gosh, yes, yeah.
Big bump in the track.
Just to be clear, the sewer we're talking about took a huge amount of sort of central London sort of waste. I mean, it wasn't just simply a slight sewer. This was one of the most sort of significant pieces of infrastructure in and around King's Cross. So it was not only from our point of view a huge engineering feat, actually keeping it running and keeping the services going was quite a big feat as well, working with Thames Water.
Almost an underground river by the sounds of things. It's and it's probably, I guess it's been there since Victorian times, probably since at least the station was built. So having to make all that work for modern design standards, that must have been quite a challenge. I'll carry on because we've got about another 12 questions here. So next one up is a comment from Dom Monaghan regarding Camden Sewer diversion. To finish such complex engineering exercise 14 hours early is a huge achievement in itself. To do so in a confined area against the clock but without injury is phenomenal achievement. Well done, folks.
Thank you, Dom. It sounds silly, like when you think of, we effectively opened up Olympic-sized swimming pool hole to then put a sewer inside, and it's a great work. But I still look back to the day where the night, I think it was Boxing Night, and the storm that was coming through, and think, we had a COVID cases. everyone was dealing with it. It was you know, relatively at its height, and the fact that a storm come through and you know the team thought on their feet, that they controlled it, they changed the plan. We were about to excavate even further, and they changed the plan on the day actually prior to the night, knowing the storm would come through, to close it and blind the hole, knowing full well it's likely to be full by the time the next shift comes in. So I just remember back to that shift, and it was fantastic to see. So yeah,
that's quite high pressure, isn't it? Making those sorts of changes on the last day.
Yeah, it was, and I again, I don't want to sound too much like a broken record, but I think the confidence from the team having to know what the plan was and the simple milestones that they had to meet to make sure that on that one the two tracks had to go back on New Year's Eve, which I didn't quite understand at the time. I remember because New Year's Eve had been cancelled, but anyway, we still managed to get the tracks back. But yeah, it was great. And I think Dave touched on it. We thought we were going to have a big closure at the end. That was always the plan. We think it was quite as big as 101 days. So the team really put focus in on it. We knew that 10 days was a huge opportunity for us to shine, really, and we knew that it was a massive undertaking from the industry, and we needed to get confidence. So real big focus on that.
Okay, got another question here from Steve Williams. Did you use BIM 4D for sequencing and planning and virtual rehearsals to demonstrate everything works before getting on site?
No, not really. We had an integrated model. So from a design perspective, does the designs all integrate, and do we check? We had that option. We didn't turn it into 4D modeling as such.
It's funny, often the 4D models I've seen, you end up looking at them in kind of 2D anyway.
Yeah. If I'm honest, I've used it to mixed results, really, in terms of for projects where it's turned into an induction tool, which as you can see from the video, we did have a 4D rendered model and we did have those kind of things, but no, it was very much the conventional. What I would say though, the slides that we went into our planning sessions, they're very much the poor person's 4D. We had some poor people drawing everything out and measuring and to scale drawings of yellow bits of plant and each track and how things move. So it was a bit manual. If the project wasn't so fast paced with changing environments, and I think that was key. So the base, I always find 4D modeling is best when the base model doesn't change. But definitely something to consider. I definitely think it could be, how could we implement it if we did this again?
Yes. David, anything to add to that, or?
No, I mean, again, without saying the tools involved, but I mean, I think the rigorous planning of the possessions and the way we actually did things and the actual systematic approach Mark and the team employed just made it run like clockwork. Again, having these sort of more high-tech tools is brilliant, but I think it's that sort of on the paper planning that paid dividends in the long run.
As designers and constructors, you just have to think in 3D. You have to consider every stage. So in a sense, you're doing it in all but name, aren't you? Really,
I mean, again, some of the restrictions we had during COVID was actually not being able to collectively meet up in certain areas at certain times with mass people, and again, that was another way we had to sort of manage resources to keep us on track. But it's all the challenges you would expect, apart from a plague of locusts I think we faced during the programme, and the team adapted to it brilliantly. So yeah,
fantastic. So just got a few more questions. I think Mark, got your message that maybe you might be able to get the video running. So shall we? Do you want to try that a little bit later, or?
Can everyone see that?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can run that now if you like, and we'll come back to the questions.
Yeah, sorry, I just.
Just for people's benefit, the left-hand side is the new track going into the new tunnel that we are creating. So if you're looking at the video, that's all the new area going into Platform 0. And then obviously, as you look towards the right, that's where the Camden Sewer went in, and the rest of the sort of track layout as you go into the throat area.
And this is during the main 100-day blockade, which was, remind me, when was that? What time of year was that?
I think it was was it February or March through to 7th of June?
Yeah, so this is the, yes, this is March.
So just before we started this, we had Warrington going for about 10 days as well. So anybody traveling on the East Coast during this period would have been unfortunately quite disrupted.
Yes, yeah, I was, but good end result, so well worth it. And actually, it was quite well managed, to be honest, with the travel arrangements. Network Rail, they published it very well, and you could get the Thames links up to Stevenage and bypass this, and then get a train north from there. It's all very well organised.
And that's the key thing to enable us to do this. All that planning was, I know one or two of the questions said, how do you do it? Those are important things, because otherwise we would never got the blockade timescales, but we managed to secure.
I think with publishing these things, people can make different travel plans and be aware of it. And I've noticed a lot of large projects do this now, and when there are blockades, publish it plenty in advance so people can, they've got options. They can choose to do something different that weekend and not travel through the area. So
yeah,
just helps.
People like certainty. I think that's the biggest lesson learned. As long as you give them certainty and you can manage it, then I think the view is you can put up with some disruption. Definitely. Yeah.
And obviously it's a major one-off here for King's Cross. You're not going to have to touch this now for 60 years probably. Plus, I guess with the extra tracks, you've got extra flexibility as well. So it's all round a massive improvement. Okay, we've got a few more questions here. This is very good in the online environment. It's a shame you obviously can't get the reactions from the audience, but we've got some good questions here. So I'll carry on running through these if that's okay, David and Mark. We've got a question. How did you manage temporary works on such a complex multidisciplinary project? Says this is normally overlooked on railway projects. So we all concentrate on the permanent design, but the difficult temporary designs to actually build it can be quite key.
Yeah. Similar answers. So promoting them is the initial answer. So they're not get your design and then get staging afterwards. So part of our design submissions throughout was like even at IDC level was the identification and the coordination of temporary works, and then our temporary works went through exactly the same processes as permanent. So we took lessons that people put a lot of effort into permanent designs and integrating them, and then individual disciplines are then allowed to run and do their own temporary works. We changed that, and that probably again added to a little bit of frustration on the sheer amount of reviews that everyone had to do on other people's designs. But we promoted the importance of them. I will say that, of course, a few slipped through the net, especially when stages changed. And in the 100 days, we have to be very flexible in terms of if the temporary works design is required because of, it fell out of sequence from what we thought previously. And so all the engineering teams were all on board. We had designers embedded in the 100 days all the way through with us from most of our partners. Yeah, I think for me the lesson there is early identification of them, promotion of them, and we actually used it as a bit of a stick. So you couldn't get your permanent design signed off unless the integration of the temporary works had been considered and the other disciplines had acknowledged them.
Oh, that's fantastic, and that's an interesting point about the temporary works design applying as you need to the same amount of rigor of coordinating it almost like an IDC, because it's clearly got to work with all disciplines as everything on the railway has. Yeah, really good message there. A couple more questions then. Steve Williams, by allowing great engineering access, so i.e. the big blockades, how much was saved over conventional methods? Should the industry make more engineering access a priority for efficiency, costs, carbon reduction, and to put passengers and freight first?
Yes,
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously for that extended period people can't travel, but the end result is better.
I was going to say that we tended to cut off, I think I mentioned about best part of 12 months of potential programme if we did it through conventional means, and it's a difficult one to assess, as I say, because the access, as we were prior to looking at 101-day blockade, was going to be a lot more difficult to actually secure. So I think if you look at it in true comparison, we've probably saved at least 12 months and a comeback.
Yeah,
there was still a risk we might not be able to deliver this programme. So it's a bit of a difficult one to answer totally, but I know at least 12 months access potentially we've saved by going early and doing big.
I think, Dave, as well, so there's obviously some activities that we simply couldn't do in conventionals. So you can't just do it. And when I say conventionals, a 54-hour weekend. But I remember doing a task which was to have a look at trying to strip out as much as you possibly could into 54 hours to then leave the smallest type of extended blockade. And I remember when I did it, and we tried to piece that back into the rest of the calendar for 2021 to, it would have took us about another 2 years almost of sporadic 54-hour weekends, which we wouldn't have been able to do much in the middle because they were, because all the work would have been done. And we'd effectively been waiting for that 18 months, 2 years period to then try and slot in some kind of bigger closure at the end. So, as Dave said, it was a bit of an opportunity for us to, and I think we might be one of the only teams to be able to say COVID helped us in some sense. But yeah, I would say, I think echo Dave, I would say I'm not sure King's Cross would ever been finished if we didn't do it this way. But I would say 18 months, 2 years, we shaved off the back end by doing this.
So, well, definitely got the right balance here, and has sort of produced the optimum result for the passenger and saved money as well. So there's definitely something to think about there. So I've got a question here, a slightly detailed one really, but classically, you know, we don't like under track crossings near S&C where we can avoid it, and you've got the Camden Sewer going diagonally under all this new S&C. Did you have any problems with differential track settlement? I guess the new sewer obviously is a very hard surface and very fixed, but did you have any issues there that you had to deal with at all?
I think the old sewer caused a lot of this issues. I think, and you'd have to speak to the maintenance guys of this area who are absolutely superb in this area. When we used to work in and around it with track, we had to have our operations maintenance people because it certainly was it's what you know kind of. The new one we put square of it, as you can see from the video, we put square, and we actually had to move it and change the direction of that sort of the sewer away from point ends.
Yes, of course. Yes.
It was the points of one of the crossings from fast to slows. That would have sat directly over the top, and the hump would have been on top. The new crossing would have been on top of the hump of the old sewer.
Right. So Jonathan, I'm sorry to cut across you, but I know Mark, he's over in Canada. So for everybody on the call, Mark's doing a huge amount of work over in Canada at the moment. He's trying to sort out their railway. I'm just conscious he's got a time differential, and he's given his time very sparingly. Thank you tonight. Would you mind if Mark drops off, if that's okay?
Absolutely. No, thank you very much, Mark.
But before he goes, as I say, this job is a testament to Mark and the team and what he achieved. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can probably wrap it up with a couple of questions, really, or comments. There was one comment from Dom Monaghan, a fantastic example of everything that is good about our industry. We really do need to shout about great projects like this. And I agree. I think that's great that we can be doing this. This talk will be recorded, so we can publish that on the RCEA website. And yeah, we should. It's a fantastic project. I think passengers see that when they go through King's Cross, but it's excellent. I hope Network Rail and the industry can really celebrate that. Dave, and I think one final question I'd like to finish with is from Colin Headley. Really impressive job, well done. My 9-year-old asks, did you rebuild platforms 9 3/4 as well?
They were included in it. It's all the platforms. I wouldn't say we necessarily reconstructed exactly how Harry Potter and all the geeks out there who come down and take photographs, and much loved to see them on the station. But yeah, it was part of the overall plan. Definitely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything else, but I really appreciate you. We really appreciate you coming to talk to us at the IC about this. It's a fantastic project. You know, the railway projects always are truly integrated and every discipline's affected, but you know, as civil engineers are often in there in the thick of it as well. So it's really interesting to see what can be done. And I've written some notes down. Plan really was the key thing. I mean, lots of other things to take away from that, but a fantastic talk on a great project. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, my only comment is obviously Mark is, I think the other thing about planning is just simply the right people with the right behaviours, and Mark I know is gone now, but absolutely is the kind of guy you want as your number 2 on a project. Obviously he's over in Canada now, but all the lessons learned I've done on King's Cross, hopefully we can embody in doing the TRU Transpennine route upgrade over the coming years, and that's my next big project. So hopefully everything we've done here we can put to good use going forward in some of the other big programs out there.
That's fantastic. Well worthwhile. Okay, well, thanks very much. I'll end the public meeting then shortly. I hope everybody's enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing as many people as possible on the 24th of February for our Earth Structures talk. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Bye.